Hello and welcome. Transition at Infosys has finally happened. A new CEO and managing director is joining and coming on board, Vishal Sikka, ex-SAP. The big question we are asking is, has by doing this, Infosys finally atoned for its sins? And what are the sins? Well, we'll come to that in a moment. Ayaz, Memon, my co-anchor is here. Joining us, Shriram Subramanian of Ingovern, Harish, Bijoor, Pashupati, Advani, hedge fund advisor. We're all going to come to you in a moment. Ayaz, where do we begin? This most interesting subject.
Most interesting and well, it's already sent ripples across the business world, so to speak. My fundamental question is: was Narayan Murthy's comeback into the Infosys scheme of things essentially to find a successor or a CEO, or it's something that has happened and he doesn't find space for him to remain?
Okay.
So what's really the case? Or maybe somebody here can enlighten us.
Right. Okay. Shriram, let me begin with you first. For the last 6 months to a year, Infosys has been on the receiving end of much criticism, and it's precisely for this reason. There was a feeling that the company was not necessarily keeping to the best standards of corporate governance. Narayan Murthy's son was seen to be playing a vital role. All of this was seen to have triggered almost 10 senior level exits, and there was a lot of concern. And now, of course, with one shot, with Narayan Murthy and his son exiting, Chris Gopalakrishnan stepping aside, at least from an active management role, and of course Vishal Sikka coming in, all this seems to have been resolved. How are you reading it from your perspective?
Definitely, it's a big boost for Infosys and the concerns that were there over the last 1 year. The concerns from a corporate governance perspective, one, Mr. Narayan Murthy himself coming back to the company in an executive role, sort of effectively demoted Mr. Shibulal. So what was Mr. Shibulal doing there? Two is when Rohan Murthy came into the office of the chairman's office, he didn't have any experience in IT services. So, and that created a lot of dissonance internally. Neither was it being groomed for future leadership, nor was he doing anything based on his past background. So he was completely assisting only his father. So that was completely against any corporate governance principles that Infosys itself had set for itself. But today's scenario sort of wipes out all of it. And the best thing that I noticed, and I had commented last week also in Times of India, is that the promoters should let go. This is the opportunity for them to let go. It would be a bold move, but yet, because it was already at the receiving end, this may be the opportune moment, and they have done it. So the promoters have let go. They are going to be out of the board, including just Mr. Narayan Murthy taking the role of chairman emeritus, which is hopefully just non-intrusive, so to say, in the company. So to that extent, I think the company has atoned for its last 1 year of non-adherence to some corporate governance standards it had set for itself. I mean, per se, Infosys is one of the better corporate governance companies in India. But over the last 1 year, it had sort of addressed or gone below its own standards.
And that's really why we are asking, has the company atoned for its sins? Harish, Bijoor, how do you read first the events of the last 6 months to a year, and then today's dramatic announcements and rejigging?
Well, I read all of this change, and change that has been planned for, and not change that is accidental. Because, finding a new CEO does take time. And I think, they've taken a fair bit of time on this, and today's announcement is really speaking about a new hope, a new future. But what I'm excited about is the fact that, Mr. Murthy steps aside totally, completely, and irrevocably so, it looks like, because he comes out and says that he is not going to be out there except for being a titular chairman emeritus. I think that's excellent, because Mr. Vishal Sikka does not need a shadow. In fact, Mr. Vishal Sikka needs to create his own shadow, and his own shadow is going to actually deliver results for Infosys. So the brightness ahead seems to be an exciting point to look forward.
Harish, how do you read this? I mean, it's a little tricky, of course. One way of looking at it is that Narayan Murthy had this in mind, right? And obviously it would take some time to find the next best and the ideal CEO and so on. And Vishal Sikka himself seems to have come into the picture because of some wrangling within the SAP board. The other is that all the events that happened, including all the media brouhaha and the 2,000 crore legal notice, is what prompted him and his board to move quickly.
Well, I'll put it this way, that the board had to go this way because, we have to be fair on this count. Version 1.0 of N.R. Narayan Murthy at Infosys was a brilliant era. Version 2.0, or what I call the second coming of Narayan Murthy to Infosys, wasn't possibly hot at all. And I think this second coming was a bit of a letdown, and that letdown had to be plugged. And I think Narayan Murthy and his entire team has plugged it in well, bringing in Vishal Sikka at this point in time.
Right. Shriram, let me come back to you. How do you see this? I mean, was this something that had been well planned by Narayana Murthy, or do you feel that this is really in response to the mounting pressure from the world at large, i.e. Investors, big and small, media, other stakeholders and so on?
No, I don't think last year when Narayan Murthy joined the company, he knew that he would leave the company so soon. He himself had told it will take 2 to 3 years for turning around the company. So that was there. But they knew that they had to look out for a new CEO eventually, and that was said even in last June 2013. And it just happened to be that this was an opportune moment. There was a lot of pressure, of course, by investors and other stakeholders, and the spate of senior executives leaving, of course, pulled the morale down within the company, and the Narayan Murthy's second stint wasn't as impactful as the first stint, of course. And so they had to do something dramatic, and bringing in Vishal Sikka is a brilliant move. And the promoters exiting the company completely is sort of, I think, a marquee thing in India. I mean, it's a game changer in the Indian corporate governance world, because I don't think there are many companies in Indian corporate history where the promoters have really taken stepped out from being running the company to being just owners.
And we'll touch that point again in a moment, Shriram. Ayaz?
Yeah, I have a question, which is that has there been substantial collateral damage because 10 people, 10 senior people have exited. So could that have been avoided at all? They've gone through this whole.
Right.
I mean, it's been a crisis, and then the new kind of order has emerged.
Right. Pashupati Advani has joined us. I mean, let's see if he's visible and audible. Pashupati, if you can hear me, that's the question. So, could this damage have been avoided?
Well, I think you were talking about Infosys 1.0 and 2.0. One of the things is that in 2.0, you no longer have the chance to buy the stock at 70 rupees. It's now at 3,000 rupees. And, for a CEO, having not got cheap stock and he's looking at trying to create a valuation, it looks like a much tougher proposition. And I think we're having the same issues in Microsoft as well. I mean, Satya Nadella has been around a long time. They probably couldn't attract an outsider. So I think you're having some of the issues where you actually have to pay somebody a lot of money or give them stock very cheap, and our laws are very unfriendly about those kinds of things.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, there is a somewhat related question here. This is from Abhimanyu. He says, if computerization, consumerization of IT is here to stay, see how quickly BlackBerry died, then the current IT services biz model is doomed. Will the new CEO make any difference? Do you want to try that, Pashupati?
Well, obviously the new CEO brings a fresh perspective and sort of wipes the slate clean. He's come from SAP and they've obviously got domain experience. So he should be able to bring some incremental new business and maybe a new theme. And I think that that's probably what Infosys needs at this point in the game.
Harish, Bijoor, how do you see that? I mean, finally, the fact is that all of these changes in Infosys have to be seen against the backdrop of what's happening fundamentally in the IT services industry. And to that extent, is it, at a certain level, is it too late?
I don't think it's too late. It has come. Infosys to read its entire plan, its model. And if you look at Vishal Sikka, he comes from a products and platforms kind of basis. And if you really look at the Infosys the revenue, hardly about 5 to 6% of it comes from that part of the business. So I think, this is an opportune point of time when Vishal Sikka can actually plan for the future. The future is going to be quite amorphous, but I'm not in agreement to say that the end-to-end services business is doomed for failure, because, there are higher value-added items which you can climb in this space, and Infosys possibly can make efforts to climb up there.
So,
today,
yeah, go ahead.
This is Shriram. Today, if you see, TCS talks of a global market share of 1.4% of the annual IT spend. Okay, corporations worldwide are still using systems and applications which are 20, 30 years old. They are not going to junk it overnight. Okay, whether growth will come from those applications, no. But that is the bread and butter business, and those are stable revenues which are going to be there around for the next 10 years, if not more. Okay, so growth will of course come in newer applications, newer services, but the past revenues doesn't get washed away. So to that extent, the opportunity is huge. Okay, and two is there is scope for newer services, there is scope for newer markets. Of course, one doesn't need to dramatically look at changing anything. I mean, it's not that the company needs to dramatically change its services or anything. It just needs to get its sales force back in, go and attack the clients. The market space is huge.
Ayaz?
Pashupati.
I would just like to make one point. The share price of 3,000 plus, which we just spoke about now, is going to be a perennial price level. Now, the 3,000 plus represents the kind of evaluation the company gets for its end-to-end services revenue, which is 94% plus. That 6% of revenue, which comes from new businesses, products, etc., is going to determine whether this price is going from 3,000 to 9,000, which is going to give the upside to Vishal Sikka or not, and his entire team, of course. But then the focus in terms of premiums, values, and valuation is going to lie in how Infosys is going to morph itself out from being an end-to-end services company alone.
Well, I think what I meant was that at 3,000 rupees, you're talking about a large market cap. Infosys is now a super tanker. So, pulling the value by $500 million at this level or $1 billion, that's the key. And, all right, so if Vishal Sikka raises the market cap by $1 billion, he feels he should get paid $100 million, right, to do it. But there's no way that Narayan Murthy is going to agree to give him that kind of thing unless he surprises us all on the 14th with Mr. Sikka's package.
Okay. So no, but Pashupati, what's the perception now from the outside, from an investor's point of view? How do they see the Infosys stock, or how will they see going ahead?
Well, obviously, what they're feeling is that a lot of people who have left feel that the big upside is not there, and I don't think most of these guys are in for the salary. They're in it for the big in the stock. A lot of the people who've departed in the last 6 months have had large positions in stock, which also they are now free to sell, insiders. So, it's a question of taking cash off the table. We always have this problem of people saying, enough is enough and let's take my 200, 300, 500 crores. In the case of Nandan and Narayan Murthy, 4,000, 5,000 crores, and let's move somewhere else. So, I think there's a lot of that happening as well. And, the desire to, this is not a creation company. This is a company that's already
Pashupati,
settled, it's listed in the New York Stock Exchange and everything.
Yeah, but Pashupati, in the case of Narayan Murthy and Nandan Nilekani, both of them are still holding on to most of their stock, isn't it?
Yeah, except Nandan has been selling for his campaign and also to do some social work, and I'm sure Narayan Murthy has also been doing a little bit of that. But I think that, that's why the other rumor that's going around in the market is that Nandan's coming back. So let's see if that happens. Okay. So what he would do, maybe get back on the board or something, because he hasn't sold his stock. Some of the others like Bala and all have.
So here's another question that's come in, and Harish, let me put that to you. The bigger question is whether the resignation of the son, that's Rohan Murthy, is indicative of accepting it as a mistake in the first place. Harish?
Well, I see it to be a package deal. The package deal that was put forth for Infosys at that point of time is, in comes Mr. Narayan Murthy, accompanied by his son Rohan Murthy. So if Mr. Narayan Murthy is not there, then the package of Mr. Narayan Murthy and Mr. Rohan Murthy also goes up. So I look at it that way. I don't believe, I would look at it as a short tenure arrangement. I, of course, didn't imagine it would be just 1 year. I would imagine it would have been 3 years, but then it's happened faster for whatever reasons.
That's exactly, which is what we were trying to understand earlier. So let's go to the other slightly larger question. Let me start with Pashupati here. You know, the sense that promoters don't give up when they should give up, right? And to be fair, Infosys, the promoters have finally given up everything completely, or so it appears. But the larger, if you look at the larger landscape, most promoters stay dug in, refuse to budge, and inevitably this also causes a problem in the way a company is run or in the company's future, given or granted that most companies, particularly in Asia or conglomerates, are family run.
Well, you know, I think the question has answered itself. You know, it is a question of maybe hanging on too long, but you know, I think very few families, and I would say probably the Dabur family has been the most progressive in this space, where they've been able to actually totally professionalize the management and take a back seat. In fact, that also comes of because they had a lot of family members, and they decided that they would just be like a, you know, one voice and have a council, and then just take decisions together and let the professional management drive the company. There is a stage now. You know, I think in Infosys, what's happened is you got a combination of professional management and the original owner promoters, and obviously at the end of it all, it's as they say, it's all about the money, honey. And you know, I own the stock, and therefore I feel that it's the right thing for me to be doing.
So Harish, how do you see this? I mean, if you were to contrast, let's say, with the other big IT majors, right? So there's TCS, obviously owned by Tata Sons and the Tata Group, and very stable management. There's Cognizant, again somewhat owner-promoter, but again, at least for today, for now, seems to have stability at top. And there's Wipro, which obviously has Nazim Premji owning a majority stake, but never actively running the company and always having a professional CEO. How would you contrast these and what's happened at Infosys?
Well, I would say that, you know, each of these has a different way of looking at businesses. And even Infosys, if you really look at it, I would look at the fact and say that, you know, Infosys, though it was run by founders, though it was run by an entire team of people who knew every little nitty-gritty of the company, I think there were times when, you know, they did promote upwards a whole host of second-level operational managers who actually did the business. And I think, you know, that was good. But then the very same thing cut wrongly onto Infosys, because the moment people looked at the fact that, hey, listen, it looks like if I'm not a promoter, I'm not going to be where I should be. And I think that's when people started leaving the business. And I think that's getting corrected. And I think the professionalization of Infosys version 3.0, as I would call it, is actually just about beginning. And I think to that extent, I would end and say that, you know, Achhe din aane wale hain is a great slogan for Infosys as well.
Well, Achhe din aane wale hain, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. But what are the serious challenges that Sikka faces now? What are the 3 or 4 most important things that he needs to do, he needs to address?
One of the key issues that I personally feel Mr. Vishal Sikka will face is the fact of leadership. Because leadership is going to be very, very critical, and this is going to be different from the background from where Mr. Sikka comes from. Leadership and attaining leadership in a space which is an end-to-end services business is a different ballgame altogether. So I think that established norm of leadership, which will, you know, make him say from the ramparts that we have arrived, I am your leader and I will lead you into this blissful future where we are going to be doing different things, where the valuation of this company is going to go crazy, where this entire big kitty of money with which we haven't done too much is going to be spent in a purposeful manner, which is going to deepen valuation even further. So I think all of this is going to be the key challenge. I don't think it's going to be operations, because, you know, the second level and rung of Infosys is totally well oiled. But the key challenge is leadership, and that is what is going to be watched over the next year.
Pashupati, do you want to weigh in on this? I don't know if you're, I'm sure you've held Infosys stock at various points of time, if not continue to hold so. How are you seeing this?
Well, you know, I think, you know, time will tell whether we are in 2.0 or 3.0. And I think that still, while the changes are happening, the only thing that has actually pulled Infosys up in relation to the rest of the market is the rumor that there's going to be a buyback, as well as there's a rumor that Nandan's coming back, and if either of those rumors come true, then perhaps that's good for some price in the stock. That's why it went up a couple of ₹100 in the last couple of days. But I think that I'd watch and wait, and I'd be a lot more comfortable in the pure business side of a TCS rather than an Infosys at this point. Though times do change.
Shriram, Infosys was always it was seen as a benchmark in creating or setting corporate governance standards. Here onwards, will those corporate governance standards hold them in as good stead in the markets and with the larger stakeholder universe as it did in the past?
Yeah, I guess so. At least now it is one notch higher than what it was just before the announcement. And two is coming back to the question of what are the challenges Vishal Sikka as a CEO will face. One is reconnecting with the clients. I think Infosys over the past couple of years lost the connect with many key clients. And two, it is no longer an employer of choice. Infosys used to hold a pedestal, used to be on a pedestal when it came to being an employer of choice for all the techies. Now that is no longer the case. So if you look at that, is also you can see the attrition rate at Infosys, which is higher than the industry average. So I'm just saying that these are the two challenges. One is connecting with the client, and two is ensuring that it's an employer of choice. The other things, operations, as Harish said, elevating Praveen Rao to be the COO and other leaders of there. Infosys has enough bandwidth to handle the operations, and they are very robust processes internally to handle it. Just that I see Vishal Sikka as being the next Nandan Nilekani kind of a era, because Nandan used to have a very good charisma, a very good connect with clients, and that is back into Infosys now.
Okay, so let's revisit the question we started with as we close, and let me come back to you, Harish. The question was, has Infosys now atoned for its sins, in a manner of speaking, by doing today what it did today, and in some ways making up? And again, just to remind ourselves that there is, not to forget, there's a 2,000 crore legal notice against two publications, or rather 3 publications, Economic Times, Times of India, and Financial Express.
Well, I would put it this way. Sins can be due to acts of omission or due to acts of commission. I don't think Infosys has any sin due to its act of commission. If at all there were sins due to acts of omission. And that act of omission is Infosys Next. Everybody has been waiting and watching to see where is that huge kitty going to get invested into. And one has not seen joy on that front. And I think that is an act of omission. And I think if you look at it that way, yes, I think there are corrections ahead.
Shriram, your last word on this?
I think yes, to some extent, whatever, especially when Narayan Murthy came back last year, there was a slight drop in its corporate governance standards. It has at least gone up the pedestal now. And two is, I think, as Harish said, अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं. The fact that there is a more market-savvy CEO now and the promoters have let go is a very positive news. And I know the challenges are there, but the opportunity is huge. And Vishal and the team, I think, would be right enough and would be a young team sort of reinvigorating the company.
Shriram, quick question here. Do you see this setting a trend in some ways? Do you see more companies saying that, oh, if Narayan Murthy can step back from his company and hand over in this manner, maybe it's time for us to do it as well? Or is this a tree in the forest?
No, I don't think there are any more companies that I can immediately say that would follow this trend. At least not in the listed space for sure. Unlisted, of course, there are enough examples. But this is just a one-off.
Okay, Pashupati, last word there. We started by asking, like I said, has Infosys atoned for its sins of the last year? And how do you, what's your sort of concluding note on this?
I think they are atoning for their sins. I also think that Mr. Vishal Sikka is an intelligent man and has come into this position with his eyes wide open. I certainly feel he's not doing it just for salary. So I guess he feels that there is growth in this, and growth assists equals in our index, and also it means growth for the markets as well. So that's good news. As somebody else mentioned, I think it was Harish who said, "Achhe din aaye." So.
And finally, how are you seeing IT as a whole, Pashupati? Is that you said that you prefer TCS, but how is the sector as a whole looking to you?
See, the sector is basically is a sort of less in favor because it is a defensive sector. But I think people are realizing that Indian IT is here to stay and that the rupee is going to be stable around this 59-60 level. And therefore, these companies have got good business models and will continue to make the kind of earnings that they are making. And so they continue to hold them. They keep drifting into infrastructure and real estate and then coming back. So we're seeing a bit of shifting. But at the end of it all, these are good solid stocks to own in the long term.
You've left us with a ponderable day, which is the rupee in itself. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us. Ayaz?
Thank you.
Last word?
I think, you asked the question whether this is going to be a trendsetter of sorts in the industry. I agree that it's not. I think it's too much to read in one situation. But it's a good start.
It's a good start, and Narayan has set a good example.
He set a very good example.
Which people were always looking to him and towards him to do. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the India Hangout. We are going to be back soon.